Hello and welcome back to video lecture number 2 on interest groups in the political process. Today it is just me, Mr. Baver, and we are going to start and look at the most basic level as discussed in the previous lecture. An interest group is a group of people, clubs, associations, or committees that share common goals and ideas that also come together to try and convince political leaders to support their policy ideas and legislative proposals. So the goals for this lecture is what is an interest group, which we just kind of went over, and we'll go into a little bit more in a second. The second goal is to figure out how do interest groups influence the political process in the United States. And number 3, we're going to look at are interest groups good? So let's get to it. Interest groups are also called advocacy groups. These groups are important to people who feel left out or overlooked by the political system, and they provide people with the means to monitor government actions. So in general, let's review interest groups. They organize people who share goals, ideas, and concerns. They provide members with the means or the ability to participate in the political process. They also supply information to the public and to lawmakers, that is, politicians who are entrusted with making laws. You can also look at organized political action committees, the PACs, that are the active political arm of interest groups in that they collect money and use that money to support candidates for political office, often by paying for political advertising, hosting events, paying for mailings, sending out emails, and making phone calls. There are thousands of interest groups in the United States, each representing a particular or specific interest. Political scientists like Professor Fraga have identified 6 basic categories of interest groups, and they are as follows: agricultural, business groups, labor groups, cause-based, societal groups, and professional groups. So let's go into a quick description of each. The agricultural groups, these are groups that represent the farmers and the agricultural industry. The American Farm Bureau Federation presents farmers as a whole, while the National Potato Council represents a particular agricultural product, and I think you all can guess what product they represent. Business groups, they are organizations such as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the National Federation of Independent Business represent the interest of the business community. There are also trade associations that represent certain industries, such as the Snack Food Association and the American Wind Energy Association. These groups, like all groups, promote laws and policies that benefit their industry while opposing laws that would place increased taxes or regulatory burdens on their members. Number 3, we have labor groups. Labor interest groups are called labor unions, made up of groups of workers that do the same job. You have, for example, the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. You also have the Service Employees International Union, represent people who work in healthcare, building, cleaning, and public service jobs. Teachers are also members of unions, the National Education Association. Unions work to promote the interests of workers by helping get worker-friendly candidates elected to office. So that is the main goal of labor groups. Number 4, cause-based groups. Some groups, including many political interest groups, represent a cause rather than an industry or group of workers. One well-known case or cause is Mothers Against Drug Driving, or MAD. Another cause is Common Cause, a group that works to promote greater public participation in the institutions of government. Number 5, we have societal groups, and they are interest groups that represent religious, social, racial, ethnic, and gender interests. Examples of societal groups include National Organization of Women, or NOW, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, the NAACP, and the AARP. And last but not least, we have professional groups. Some interest groups represent a particular professional group, profession in this case meaning one that requires advanced schooling and training. Examples include the American Medical Association and the American Bar Association. These groups establish standards for their profession and influence the training and licensing required to practice the profession. Alright, so let's look at a couple more points before we get to the end. So, number 1, interest groups influence policy by supporting a candidate for political office at the national, state, or local level. This support is called endorsing a candidate. A group's decision to endorse a candidate depends on the candidate's position on the group's core interests. There are naturally groups that back Democrat candidates and groups that back Republican candidates. Number 2, lobbying is the practice by which interest groups contact public officials or politicians to persuade the official to support the group's ideas for new laws or regulations. In recent times, lobbyists have come under greater scrutiny for their practices and how much they influence lawmakers by providing gifts, trips, fancy meals, and other things, and that may be a distortion of the political process. In 2007, in fact, Congress passed ethics and lobbying reform legislation to limit activities by lobbyists. The reforms enjoyed success early on, but interest groups have found new ways to circumvent the rules. And last but not least, in certain circumstances, interest groups can promote changes in policy or laws by mounting legal challenges in the courts. The most famous example of this is the NAACP's challenge to end segregation in schools in the landmark Brown v. Board case of 1954. So quickly to go back to lobbying reform, if you look at the picture on the top right corner of a lobbyist basically eating up the Capitol building. So that would be a political cartoon talking about lobby reform and what lobbyists do. So if you have any questions, please write them down and we will go over them in class, and thank you.